Good afternoon, everyone. We are so happy that you are joining us this afternoon for the All CT Reads 2025 Adult Author Talk with Monica Wood, who's here with us. She is the author of this year's primary adult title, How to Read a Book. My name is Ashley Sklar, and I am the Adult Services and Community Engagement Consultant with the Connecticut State Library, Division of Library Development. I collaborate on All CT Reads along with my colleague, Kimberly Poe, Children and Young Adult Consultant. Unfortunately, she's not here, but together we co-created All CT Reads and are very proud to be in our 4th year. For those of you new to the Connecticut State Library's program, All CT Reads is a year-long initiative to promote lifelong reading, learning, and connection that uses a rotating committee structure to select one main book title and 3 shortlist book titles each calendar year for 3 different age groups. So we have kids ages 9 to 12, teens ages 13 to 18, and of course, adults. So in addition to the books, All CT Reads provides a supported programmatic structure for Connecticut libraries built around these titles with lots of room for individuality and creativity. In creating All CT Reads, we also crafted a why statement, which we find very important. We want a way to read together. We want continuous conversations across our state. We wanted to offer avenues of participation for spaces big and small to talk about inclusivity, cultures, acceptance, mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, to borrow the words of the wise Rudine Sims Bishop. We want adventure, mystery, and relationships too. We wanted a lineup of books that looks just like this one. We are thrilled to be joined today by Monica Wood, author of the primary title, How to Read a Book. I'm also very excited to welcome Connecticut librarian and All CT Reads committee member, Cindy Haiken of the Wallingford Public Library, who will introduce Monica and lead us through today's conversation. I also want to share with you the All CT Reads adult shortlist because there's lots of good books here. There include the 3 titles you see here: Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez, The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters, and Evil Eye by Ataf Rum. We welcome you to visit the All CT Reads website to learn more about all of these adult titles, as well as all the other age groups too. Here, of course, you will find information on how to get the books. You will see that we have book discussion sets available to borrow by public, school, and academic libraries. For individuals, you can access the ebook or audiobook versions in the State Library's Palace app with your local library card. You will find information also on the talking book format if you're eligible for services through the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books. And of course, you can always visit your local library. So here come my thank yous. There's a lot, so indulge me. We are grateful to our All CT Reads Adult Committee who worked together to create a reading list, read through all of the titles throughout the summer months, and come together in the fall to make these selections. It is collaborative, and I must admit, so much fun working with them. So this year's committee includes Cindy, of course, from the Wallingford Public Library, Jasmine Huff from the Arthur Banks Library at Capital Community College, Kate Orlomowski from the Saxton B. Little Free Library, and Sarah Ray from Bloomfield Public Library. A huge thank you to Deborah Schonder, our state librarian, and Dawn Laval, director of the Division of Library Development, for providing the leadership, vision, and so much space to encourage creativity and innovation to flourish across our agency and foster programs such as this. We also want to acknowledge and give thanks that this project is funded by the state of Connecticut and the Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act. All CT Reads is also supported by a generous grant from the EBSCO Information Services to the Connecticut Heritage Foundation, and we partner with the Connecticut Library Consortium and Connecticut Association for School Librarians. So before I turn it over, just a few housekeeping things, I promise. We are recording today's program, as you've probably noted, and we will be sharing the recording on the All CT Reads website. Zoom has live captions. Those are turned on, so please feel free to use and adjust those for yourself at the bottom of your screen. And while Kim could not be here today, I am very happy to have my colleague Suzanne Kiss joining me for support. We will both be here with you. We will keep our eyes on the chat. We will share links there too. Please feel free to add your questions there, along with your insights and conversation along the way. We will also be following up with you after the session with a brief survey. So please take a moment, share your feedback. We read it. It informs what we do. So thank you. And with that, I am excited to finally turn it over to Cindy to get us started. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Happy spring, almost spring. It's spring. It's just cold here today. And I'm so excited to be here with you and with Monica Wood to hear her talk about how to read a book and to ask her some questions and ask your questions too. Monica was born and raised in a mill town in Maine, not that dissimilar to the one that the novel's heroine, or I should say one of the two heroines maybe, Violet was born in. She's the author of several novels in addition to How to Read a Book, including The One in a Million Boy, Any Bitter Thing, Ernie's Ark, My Only Story, and Secret Language. She's also the author of numerous short stories, a best-selling memoir called When We Were the Kennedys, several works of nonfiction for writers and teachers, and 3 plays. She is in other words, she can do anything. She is the 2024 recipient of the Sara Josepha Hale Award for Excellence in New England Literary Arts, the 2019 recipient of the Maine Humanities Council Carlson Prize for contributions to the public humanities, and the 2016 recipient of the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance Distinguished Achievement Award for contributions to the literary arts. Impressive. She lives in Portland, Maine, with her husband, Dan Abbott, and their adorable cat, which I've now seen a picture of, Susie. Monica, thank you so much for joining us today.
You are so welcome. I am really, really happy to be here. I have to say, I find it so heartening. I'd really just like to start with this, is that especially in, I think, really unprecedentedly divided times that we're in right now, that we American humans can still find a way to gather community around a book of all things. I find that really, really heartening, and I appreciate it so much, not just as a writer, but really as a citizen and as a reader. I appreciate it very, very much. If you think of what it really means, is here we are all here for mutual either affection for a book or a desire to discuss a book, or even to discuss with other people what you didn't like about the book. But the idea is that we're all here because of that. It doesn't matter who we voted for or what we look like or where we live. None of that matters right now. Just we're all readers at the moment coming together. And that is no small thing. And I'd just like to acknowledge that and thank the committee who suggested this and for picking my book. I'm really happy that you did. And I just wrote down on my little thing the other titles that were in the running, and I feel very honored right now to be here. So I'm going to start because, if I read a book a month ago, I can't remember what it was about. So for those of you who are like me, I would like to just say a little summary of the book. So you follow it's a novel in which you follow 3 characters. The first character her name is Violet Powell. She's 22 years old, and she is just finishing up a prison sentence for a drunk driving accident in which she killed a kindergarten teacher. The other character is Harriet Larson, who is a retired English teacher who is volunteering as the leader of a book group in the women's unit at the prison where Violet is serving time. And Violet is one of the participants in this book group. And the third character is Frank Daigle, who is a retired machinist, and he is now working as a handyman in a bookstore in Portland, Maine, which is modeled after my beloved Longfellow books in Portland. They've been there my whole career. I've had every single book launch of my entire career at Longfellow Books. And I called it Wadsworth Books in the book because Henry Wadsworth Longfellow he was born in Portland, Maine. He's like our big fancy, famous poet. So I thought, I'll call it Wadsworth Books. So the 3 of these characters meet in this bookstore, And I should add that Frank is the widower of the woman that Violet killed in the accident. And once these three meet, the plot takes off from there with these three entwined lives. And that's really all I'll say about it right now, just to refresh your memory. Um, there's a couple things I want to say. One is that as a writer, I never ever start with theme. If you start with a theme, your book is doomed from the get-go, in my opinion. But themes have a way of bubbling up unbeknownst to the writer. And sometimes it takes a reader to tell you what your themes are, which is a very interesting phenomenon. So they'll say, wow, I really saw a lot of like generational stuff in here. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, actually, you're right. I didn't do that on purpose. But, you have Frank and his daughter, you have the kids in the bookstore who work in the bookstore and Frank. And so there's a lot of generational stuff. But the theme that comes out, I think, the most strongly in this book is the theme of forgiveness. And not just forgiving others and really it's about forgiving the unforgivable. And it's not just about forgiving the unforgivable in others, but forgiving the unforgivable in ourselves. And whenever I do a live event, I have these people sitting in front of me. And whenever I start talking about forgiveness, the place goes kind of still because I think it is part of the human condition for us to be able to grant the grace of forgiveness to other people. And yet when it comes to granting that same grace to ourselves, we have a really hard time with that. And when I mention that in a group, all the heads start nodding. It never fails. And I find it very interesting that we're not alone in that phenomenon. It's just, I think it is part of the human condition. And so the book certainly explores those themes about how do you forgive yourself? How does Violet forgive herself? And Violet's not the only one who has things that she wishes she could undo. And at one point in I think it's in one of the bookstore book club scenes, Harriet says something about humans existing on a continuum. And at one end of the continuum is maybe the best thing you've ever done. And at the other end is the worst thing you've ever done. But it's not binary like that. People aren't like that. The continuum is this. We are all the selves we ever were. We're our 2-year-old self, we're our 8-year-old self, we're our 25-year-old self, we're our 40-year-old self, we're our 70-year-old self, we're our 89-year-old self, all at the same time. And we figure out ways to not move on from or forget, but to exist simultaneously with our best and our worst. And that's what it means to be a human being. And so I think not on purpose, but what I do is I start with a character who has a problem. And then as I work my way into the story, I just kind of follow the language into the story. That's how I find story. These themes kind of bubble up just from watching characters react in the situations I put them in. You place pressure on somebody to see who they really are, just like in real life. And the other thing that I love to do is put my characters to work in jobs that actual people really do. For one thing, because I really love talking to people. I'm an introvert because I'm a writer, but I'm a very friendly introvert. I'm a very social introvert. And so you got to get out of the house once in a while. So one way to do that is to say, I think I'm going to do a machinist character. So you go and find machinists and figure out ways to feel like what that job might be. So I always put my characters to work in real jobs. And I really liked the ones I came upon in this one. One was running the book group. One was Frank as a machinist, and the other is Violet as somebody who works as an assistant to the researcher in a bird lab that's studying avian cognition. So I think that's all I'm going to say right now. I think I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, who is going to be doing Q&A, and I think a lot of the stuff that I would say in a talk, if you were all in front of me, is going to emerge from the question and answer.
Yeah, well, you've already given me plenty. I was scribbling notes while you were writing, but yes, Ashley just put in the chat, but please, if anyone who's on the Zoom has questions for Monica, please put them in the chat. We'll be watching, and I promise to ask as many of them as I can. But you just gave me an opening with those three jobs that your three main characters do. Because if you've read the book already, you know that there's a tremendous amount of knowledge of all three of those jobs, none of which, so far as I know, Monica Wood has actually ever been professionally engaged in doing. So the question is, well, one, you had a little bit of experience in. How did you, so starting with, let's start with the Prison Book Club, because I know you have had some really fascinating experiences of that personally.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, for a period of 10 years, I did it's not what Harriet did. And I also hasten to say that none of the women in the book group, the fictional book group, are based on the people who were in my real groups on purpose, because I didn't want to, for obvious reasons.
Right.
But I have to say that the feeling Harriet has as she's doing this work is very, very much from my own experience. Just the whole vibe of it, and the prison itself is exactly what I experienced, except that there wasn't a terrible Mr. Flinders. The person who did that job was actually really, really nice. So he's probably very mad at me right now.
Every time you say Flinders and I think fingers, and I have this very vivid image of him.
No, the real guy was a total sweetheart. But anyway, so I did this program for 3 years, and how I got into it was the Maine Humanities Council, which has an office right down the street from where I live in Portland, had a kind of a one and done thing they did with the women's unit at the Wyndham Correctional Center, which is about 7 miles from my house. And they decided they had a volunteer go over and do a book club for this one book. And it was an earlier book of mine called Ernie's Ark. And I'm very easy to find. So the woman who was doing it knew I lived in Portland. So she asked me if I would come in for their last session so the women could talk to me and ask questions. So I did. And it was so wonderful. They asked amazing questions. They had insights that were new to me. They were funny, they were smart. We laughed a lot. It was a really delightful experience. And I came home after that, and I remember just saying to my husband, I can't explain this, but I felt completely at home there, like I belonged there. It was the most overwhelming feeling. And I said, I have to go back. I really want to go back and do something. And the next day, I went down to the Humanities Council and asked them for $1,000 so I could buy some books. And they explained to me very gently that there are grant processes for this sort of thing. I just went strutting in there, asking for my $1,000. But they very generously kind of walked me through. They happened to have a grant that was perfect for what I had in mind. So what I did is I ended up with a program. It was 12 weeks long, for 12 women who were self-selected, people who wanted to read and wanted to try writing. It was called Meet the Authors. And Maine is you can't swing a cat without hitting a writer in Maine. And we all know each other. And so my idea was that we would read 4 books in 12 weeks. And the 4 books would be of 4 different genres. And the authors would be women writers in Maine, all of whom were friends of mine. So we did a children's book, we did poetry, we did science writing, and we did personal essay. And it was really a marvelous experience. How it would happen is we would read the book, discuss it, and then ask the author to come in. And then the author and I together would devise a writing assignment based on the genre we had just been reading. So and the writing part of it was very, very popular. So I did that program over a period of 3 years. And what would happen is the 12 weeks were up, and the ones who graduated would get their certificate and their points and all that stuff. But some wanted to stick around to work a little bit more on their writing project. So the 12 weeks would be 16 weeks, or in one case it was 20 weeks. So it was a very flexible program, and the education person over there was flexible with me, which was great. So that's where I got, that wasn't research, it was just something that I had done. And it stayed with me so much that it just kind of came pouring out in this book.
Yeah, I mean, and the way you create the sense of the prison and the walkways and the doors and the locks and the waiting for the buzzer, really vivid, really,
Yeah.
really
Well,
vivid.
it's a very clangy place. Everything clangs in a prison. It's and it's noisy, and yeah, not the most pleasant place. But then once you're in the room with these lovely people, everything else kind of goes away. It's fascinating.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We have a Fran in the chat wrote that she was a retired teacher and volunteered in a men's prison one summer, and that she was not allowed to bring even a purse,
Yeah.
anything at all, in, and was surprised that Harriet could bring her bag in.
Yeah, they did allow me to bring my bag. I mean, they get used to you after a while, and I look about as, I mean, I'm just this harmless old lady, they don't think I'm going to be bringing in drugs or anything. But once in a while there would be a new CO at the desk, and he'd look me over and look in my bag and stuff. But I had my things. I mean, I had, handouts and books and things that I needed for my, and what I would do is I would bring, I think I brought them 10 pens, and it had to be black, it couldn't be blue, and I would have to collect them at the end to make sure I still had 10 pens. It is, there's a lot of that. It's funny, I heard somebody do like a live review of the book, and it was a guy, and he said, well, I mean, prison isn't like that, and obviously she didn't do her research or something. And I'm just like, oh, will you just? Of course I did my research. Anyway, so yeah, but the thing about prison, and I think a women's unit might be slightly different, but honestly, I don't think so. But the thing is that the rules feel very arbitrary. So one day they'll search your bag, turn everything, and other day you just like, oh, hi, go on in. For a while, I wasn't even accompanied. I would just, and it was a ways from the entry to the women's, which was way in the back. And I would choose to walk. I hated walking through the prison. So I would choose to walk around the yard. And then one day I wasn't allowed to do that anymore, and so it's very, very arbitrary, which makes it a little bit of a challenging place to volunteer, but a very challenging place to live.
Right. And did you have to get the books approved? Did they have to approve the books you chose?
They didn't approve the books I chose, but they had to come directly from the bookstore. I couldn't bring them in. They had just had an incident of some lickable drug that had been put in a book. And so there were no books allowed in for a while. I was the only one bringing any books in. But as long as they came directly from the bookstore, I could use them. So.
Ashley wrote in the chat that she visited the York Correctional in Niantic for an arts program, and she said she could not bring in anything, but she said it was one of the most meaningful experiences she ever had.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, after a while, I was allowed to bring in a lot of stuff. I brought in like little postcards for, like little art things for some of our prompts that we were using. And what else did I have? I brought in, I can't remember now, but I brought in some things but they just let me do it. So again, arbitrary.
That's great. And I read in one interview you gave that you felt these were all women that grew up in similar circumstances to you, and
we were all just small town Maine girls. That's where most of them were from. There were a couple that once in a while there's a prison, like there was one in Rhode Island that would ship people up if they were overcrowded. And so I did have a couple of women who were from the Rhode Island system. But mostly, honestly, it was just small town Maine gals. And we had way more in common than not.
Right. Which is really eye-opening and thought-provoking.
The
Yeah.
line is very thin.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that I understand, but how did you know so much about being a machinist? That the detail that you
Thank
brought to
you.
Frank's work, I was like, she hasn't. How did you get that?
Okay, that was hard one, I have to tell you, because I am the least mechanical person in the world. You know those they used to give us these tests back in my day to students about your abilities and and anything mechanical, forget it. Like they used to give you these spatial perception exercises where they would show something. The image was like a flattened piece of paper with broken lines where you would bend the thing at the broken line, and then they'd give you like five full like 3D, like which one is it if you folded it all up that way, which one of the I zero, I mean zero. I have no ability to imagine things in 3D, which is something you really have to do to be a machinist. But my father-in-law was a machinist. He had his own shop, and when my husband was a young man, he worked with his dad in the shop for a little while. And so I kind of knew the world of it. I was very close to my father-in-law, and I've been in the shop several times. And my husband teaches over at Southern Maine Community College in the architectural and engineering design department. And he connects with a lot of the other programs, and one of them is the precision machining program. So he hooked me up with the machine guys, and I took I took the class once a week for a semester.
Wow.
Yeah, wow,
Wow.
right, because I was so bad. And these kids, it was me and like 19 or 12, maybe 12, 19-year-old boys. So there we were, and our teacher. And I learned how to run all the machines. I learned how to measure things very precisely, which is, again, not my thing. I actually made a thing that I never show because it's so embarrassing. It was like a holder for a pen and a little well that you can put paper clips in. But it was a really great experience. And I realized what I needed is I didn't really know, I didn't really have to know like the differences between different metals, although I did learn that. I didn't need to learn how to run a lathe and a milling machine, even though I did. But what I did need to know is what it feels like to stand at a milling machine for 4 hours and to feel those little chips coming off, and they really sting. It's like being stung by bees if you don't have a long gloves or something. You can't wear gloves because it's dangerous.
Right.
And just how how your feet start to hurt and your back hurts a little bit. And I'm thinking, Frank, he probably has chronic pain after doing this for 40 plus years. And it gave me a way to get inside his body in a sensory way that gives me as the writer permission to then extrapolate all these other things about this character. So it was a good experience.
And you made it very clear that he really misses that life.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the very simple for him jobs that he's doing at the bookstore make him so happy.
Yeah.
They make him so happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also, I mean, for anybody of a certain age, hanging out with young people is very invigorating. And it's so funny. I mean, they're so different. They speak completely
They're
different
so
language.
funny, those characters. Those people who work in the bookstore are so funny.
Yeah, they were really fun to write.
I'll bet. Somebody from the Stonington Free Library asked, I definitely want to make sure to get back to the birds, but asked how you got into writing and
oh my goodness.
and getting published for the first time.
Yeah, I've been writing since I was 4 years old. I just was born holding a pen, really. Like most writers I know, started very young. My first writing was, my sister was in college when I was a very little girl, and the first writing I ever did was letters to her at college. And I honestly, I'm a very late bloomer, even though I've always been a writer. I didn't start publishing until I was in my 30s, and that was just short stories hither and yon. And I didn't write my first novel until I didn't publish my first novel until I was 40. So I'm 71 right now. And so I wrote a lot of books in my 40s and 50s and 60s. And I'm sort of glad in a way that I waited that long to publish because one thing about writing, which unlike, say, professional ice skating, is you get better, as you get older, it's better for your career. If I'd wanted to be an ice skater, I would have been washed up 40 years ago at this point. But I do believe that as I get older, my writing gets better because I'm older and wiser and have more experience and more, more sorrow and more happiness and more everything that life hands us. And that's only a good thing for a writer. So I did get started late. So if you're just starting now and you're over 40, fear not. It's never too late.
Dominique just wrote in, you're giving me hope. It's not too late for me to write a book, which is
really
great.
Is not. No.
Totally great. Okay. Why parrots? Why African gray parrots? So Violet works in this lab researching Mikhail Petrov, and who I'm not going to say anything about because you have to read the book to learn about him. Researching the cognitive abilities of African gray parrots. So why parrots? Why African grays? And how did you learn about that?
I have been waiting decades to put this job in a book, and I finally found the place for it. I've been following the career of Dr. Irene Pepperberg for years, and really since the late 70s. And she has been doing avian intelligence research with African gray parrots since then. And when she first started out, and again, this is pre-internet, I would read like a newspaper story might come up, or there might have been a thing in Life magazine. I don't know where I first found her, but once I did, I was so fascinated with this parrot she had named Alex, whom she was teaching to recognize not just different objects, but the color of the objects, the material the objects were made of, and most astonishingly, the quantity of objects. So this parrot could count, he could differentiate between bigger and smaller. He was really amazing. And at the time, all of the animal intelligence research was being done by men. Well, most science was being done by men back then. She was a real iconoclast and a trailblazer for sure. But all of the research on animal cognition was being done on primates because they're the closest to us. They would remember a gorilla named Coco that they taught sign language to.
Yes.
He was very famous for a while. And but the thing about, and people just thought bird brains, they really did. They thought, and birds do have very little brains, but there is a lot going on in that walnut-sized little brain of theirs. But no one took bird intelligence seriously. They thought parrots, any bird who talked was just mimicking. And Alex was not mimicking, and her studies, which were, peer-reviewed scientific method. She wrote many papers. These were very carefully designed studies that showed this parrot knew all of these things. So he died so tragic. He was only 33. He was just in the prime of his life. And he died of a virus or something. And she found him in his cage one morning, which must have just broken her heart. And this was a story all over the world. I remember where I was when I read that Alex the parrot died, and I just burst into tears. And I'm not the only one. He had a lot of fans, and this was before internet, So she is now working with these two parrots. One is Griffin, and the other is Athena. And I met them. I asked her if I could come in. She was at Harvard at the time, which is like a 2-hour train ride from where I am. So I asked her if I could come. I told her I was working on this book and that one of my characters worked in a lab with African gray parrots, and that I had been a big fan of Alex and, very admiring of her work. And it took me 3 tries for her to agree. And I finally recognized why she was reluctant, because when she finally agreed, she said, I had a writer come in here one time and I ended up as the murderer in his book. And I said, oh, well, I don't write murder books, so there's that. And I said, the guy, the scientist is a Russian male, so nobody's going to think it's you. And I said, I promise to be very respectful of the research and of the birds, because I am, and Violet is, and this is a real thing. And so that's why I put, but because they were so extraordinary, I put a note at the end of the novel so people would know these birds were based on actual birds. This is real science. And the only thing I took liberty with is them learning people's names, because that's the one thing that Dr. Pepperberg doesn't bother with. Mainly because, not that they couldn't, I have no doubt they could learn everybody's names, but she doesn't, it's not really important to the studies that she's doing. And they have different people coming in and out of the lab all the time. And at any present time, there could be like 5 Olivias, at Harvard, or, that's just how it goes. So she didn't want to either confuse them or, just clutter up what they were learning with something that wasn't essential to the studies she was doing. So, but everything else, all the stuff they do, counting and identifying and bigger, smaller, and it's really fascinating. So meeting them, it was like meeting Bonnie Raitt. I mean, I was like so starstruck. And one of them, Athena, was the younger one, and she was still kind of a little party girl. She didn't really like to work that hard. And she was very friendly. And when I walked in, just like in the book, she kind of lifts her foot like this and goes like that. And that means, it looks like they're saying hi, but it means they want to get on you. And so I said, they say, just say shoulder. And I said, shoulder. And she just stepped on my shoulder. I just about melted into my shoes. And Griffin was a little more standoffish. He's probably 25 now, maybe 26. And he's at the peak of his powers. And he's like the kid in the front row who says, me, 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 I know the answer. He loves going through his paces. So I'm guessing Athena, who's now maybe, I think she was 8 when I met her, so she'd be 11 or 12 now. I think she's probably doing more than she was doing when I met her. She was more interested in socializing than working at that time.
How did you, Ollie is such a character. He is so funny. And I'm guessing there wasn't an Ollie in that lab.
There was not an Ollie. I made Ollie up. But when I was a kid, I had a very talented parakeet named Joe. And I named him after our landlord. I was 3 years old. And he lived 9 years, which is amazing because my mother took exquisite care of this bird. She spent all her time with him. She talked to him, sang to him. He could do tricks. He could sing. He could sing a few bars of the old song, Sugar in the Morning. He was a really fantastic bird. And so Ollie is a little bit like kind of bringing my little childhood parakeet back to life. But I loved Ollie. Nobody ever trained him. So he was, and Misha kind of gave up on him, but kept him kind of as a pet. But I think Ollie has, another chapter after. I'm not going to write it, but I think in the life out there with where he ends up, I think he's going to do some interesting things.
It's hard to imagine not. Yeah. Did you send Dr. Pepperberg a copy of the book?
What's funny? I have not done that yet. I know. I don't know. I do know why I haven't. I keep saying I've got to do this. But I'm sure I got something wrong. How could I not? I am sure I got something wrong, and I don't want to disappoint her. So I have not sent it yet. I don't even know if she knows the book exists.
You should. You definitely should. I bet you she apart from your wonderful mention of her in the acknowledgments, I assumed when Misha has an angry aside about that annoying Cambridge research, and I figured that was her, and I loved that moment. So you should definitely send that.
I know. Okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for the nudge. I needed that.
So you said something about this being the first book you wrote with the moral support of your writing group, and I thought that was a really interesting comment, and I wondered what that meant.
Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow. I have never written, I mean, I've written for decades now, and I've never had a writing group. And about 8 years ago, my friend Kate Christensen, who's a marvelous novelist, decided she was sick of writing alone. And she asked me and Bill Rohrbach, another fantastic novelist, and Lewis Robinson, ditto, and Sarah Bronstein, ditto, if we wanted to be in a writing group. And we said, well, we'll try it. We'll try it for a couple, just, see how it goes. And it was, oh my goodness, it just, the loneliness that I realized accompanies writing is just, that completely disappeared. You have four other people, all of whom are also, serious, well-published novelists. We have the same goals. We have a lot of the same history, publishing history. Just to have that in common with these people, and I respect their work so much. I love their work. And we, at this point, we're kind of like a little family. There's five of us, and we're all one of five siblings, and we've kind of fallen into a kind of five sibling, Bill and I are the oldest ones, and then Kate is the middle child, and then the two youngsters are Lewis and Sarah. And our dynamic is a little bit like that. And we all had books come out last year. And we all felt so proprietary about each other's books doing well, because we had a lot of input. We read thousands of pages literally for each other. And there's a time in the writing of any book where you start to fall into a kind of profound existential despair, where this book is awful, and ergo everything you ever written in retrospect is awful. And we kind of save each other from those moments and give each other ideas about where the detour is, why are we stuck, how can we get out of it. And having these, and they're all so smart, and we just give each other a lot of comfort and solace, and mainly ideas, like how do we go forward from here. So I don't think I can write another word without them.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big surprise to me.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Dominique said that you should send the book to Dr. Packenberg with Maine goodies.
That's a good idea.
She could, the maple syrup or the berries, or so that if she's upset about something in the book, she won't be upset because
that is a really good idea. I love that. Thank you for that. Fantastic.
There was one other thing I read that I thought was so moving, that you said that Violet was this character in your head waiting to be born.
Yeah.
That you felt this distant monologue that was going on in your head, and you just woke up one morning and wrote her.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was surreal, because that has never happened to me. That's kind of how people who don't write novels think characters arrive, like as sort of a bolt from the blue, but it's never like that for me. And this one was so different. And it was night after night, I could hear this murmuring voice. And once I wrote it out, I remember sitting up in bed, and I literally said, I was writing plays at the time, and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm a playwright now. You have to find somebody else. And she persisted, and I wrote what she said one night. It took me about an hour, and what I wrote is basically chapter one. It wasn't as polished as that, obviously, but it was basically chapter one, and I put it away for a couple of months. And Harriet showed up the next night once I thought this was out of my system, and hers was much more fragmented. It was just, like, who is this? And there were a few words, and it's funny, I still have the notebook, and it's funny to see it now. And I put that away as well. And then a couple of months later, I was just insane with curiosity about what connected these two characters. And that's when I started writing the book. So it was a very different process from my normal.
That is astonishing. Astonishing.
Yeah, this book was a real gift, and it gave me so little trouble, partly because I had a writing group. But so it's my favorite in the sense that it gave me the least trouble, except for Ernie's Arc is my favorite for that. That gave me zero trouble. But this gave me very little trouble. And the other thing about this book is that I wrote it so fast. It took me 2 years total, which is half my normal time. And so now when I go out and I talk about these characters, usually once you're done with the characters, you're done. You're so done. It's like, don't let the whole door hit you on the way out. Goodbye. Thank you for your service. I never want to see you again. In this case, because I really spent much less time with them than I normally do, I miss them. So it's kind of nice to reconnect with
Oh,
them in
oh,
doing things like this.
oh, yes. Emily just wanted to know if that means there'll be a sequel.
Oh, well, there can't be a sequel if you,
Oh, yes,
right?
yes. Actually, sadly,
Yes.
if you finish the book,
Sadly, there cannot be a
you
sequel.
know why there cannot be a
Yes.
sequel.
Mhm.
Um, yes, well, there could be
Well, there could be, and
there
I
could
could
be
figure it
a
out, but
spin-off.
no.
There could be a spin-off.
Yeah, but I'm done with them. I'm done.
I see Emily had one more question, and I
Yes.
know we are at time, but maybe we can quickly sneak this
Yeah,
one
it's a
in.
great question, which is about where you came up with the idea about the accident
Mhm.
that winds up being, what binds these characters together, because it's so
Yeah,
vivid
it is.
and
I have,
horrific. And
yeah, I have a very dear friend whose beloved cousin caused he wasn't a drunk driving, but he killed an entire family in an accident. And he spent I think 3 years in prison. And I remember asking her one time, like, how do you move on? Like, how does he live with that? How does he move on from that? And she told me something that is now in the book. And she said he didn't move on, but he figured out a way to stand beside it. And I
Mm.
thought that was so profound because that's all we can do. You
Yeah.
can't erase these things. You can't go back. You can't, there's no moving on in the sense like, and for whoever the people were who lost that whole family, how do they move on? They don't. They just figure a way to stand beside it. So that's a great question. Thank you. No one's ever asked me that one.
Oh my goodness. I thank you
I can't
so
believe we're
much.
done.
I
I know
can't believe
that
we're
just
done either.
flew.
I was gonna say I could sit here and listen to you all afternoon. This was incredible. I thoroughly loved the book, and it's an incredible opportunity to get to hear directly from you all about it, Monica. So thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much. Thank you for picking this book, really,
Yeah.
for us
Yeah.
all to
It picked
read.
me. It picked me.
Right? We're so appreciative. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We did record today's session, so for those folks that couldn't make it, we know schedules just don't always align. We are looking forward to sharing this with them. There's lots of resources on our website. And of course, please take a moment, fill out our evaluation when you get it. We appreciate it. Again, thank you, everyone. Take care.